Well, Grady, there's this particular topic that caught my eye, and I'd love to get your insight on this. I think this is quite interesting, and it's talking about cloud seeding technology to make it rain. It says the United Arab Emirates averages less than 200 millimeters of rainfall a year, in stark contrast to London's average of 1,051 millimeters and Singapore's 3,012 milliliters. And it says this, in the UAE, temperatures can reach as high as 50 degrees Celsius during the summer, where 80% of the country's landscape is covered with desert terrain. The United Nations projects that by 2025, 1.8 billion people will face absolute water scarcity across the world. In the 1990s, the UAE introduced a rain enhancement methodology called cloud seeding. Cloud seeding is a process increasing the amount of rain produced from the clouds above, which is designed to improve water shortages issues in different regions around the Emirates. The government's introduced a task force called the National Centre of Meteorology in Abu Dhabi, where more than 1,000 hours of cloud seeding is performed each year to enhance the rainfall. Once they spot the right cloud, they instruct pilots to take to the air with the specialized aircrafts loaded with hygroscopic flares on the plane's wings. Each flare contains around 1 kilogram of salt minerals components and can take up to 3 minutes to burn and shoot into the right clouds. After the seeding agent is introduced into the cloud, the droplets increase in size, surpassing the cloud's capacity to sustain them against gravity, resulting to their release as raindrops. So, Dr. Grady, I found this quite interesting. Can you give us an insight into what is all this about?
Well, yeah, I thought it was very interesting when you said you'd like to start the program tonight with that, because the first real cloud seeding started the year I was born in 1946 with experiments by Dr. Schaefer. Mind you, for several hundred years previous to that, people had taught about it, thought about it, etc., including things like burn a forest to cause it to rain. However, since 1946, we are fairly sophisticated in it, although there are a lot of drawbacks. I think people are not taking a really solid look at this. And there are ethical issues. There's international border issues. I would say this, since 1946, the last few decades, on all 5 continents, we have had people that have been seeding clouds. This is not something brand new with the UAE at all. There's at least 20 to 30 countries that do it right now. What's really funny is most of them are seeding clouds not to produce rain, but to reduce the size of hail.
Okay.
People don't kind of think about that. But even here in the States, we have areas, and there are other countries, where they are seeding clouds to prevent the hail from being large and damaging, so that the hail will be small and not damage crops. Whereas if it was allowed to, in fact, develop a storm much bigger, the hail would destroy crops. I mean, that's been the primary purpose of it. And it can be used, again, to create rain, and you can understand why the UAE would want to.
Yeah.
But there's real questions about who owns the clouds. Most of the time, you can make it rain using things that's silver iodine, or actually just salts. In Australia, they've been doing it for a long time by simply evaporating seawater, because they've got a lot of seawater in Australia.
So this is a technology that's not only being used in the UAE, but also, like you say, in the United States, Australia, and the rest of the parts of the world.
Continents. Yeah, there's 20, 30 countries, and like I said, on 5 different continents, in Africa, Asia, etc., that have had cloud seeding programs, that are experimenting with cloud seeding programs. And the materials, generally speaking, are pretty easy to work with. Salts, just table salt even. The salt from seawater. If you evaporate the seawater, then the salts are left in the air because the water evaporates away, and that can be used in Australia to generate cloud seeding. And so it's actually not a new technology at all. The next question, though, is the one of international borders.
Yeah.
You know, who owns the clouds? Clouds come and clouds go. It is not, in any stretch of the imagination, a perfect science. It's very young, really, in terms of what we can and cannot do and when to know to do it. And the question, too, is, do you own the clouds? If you make it rain where you are, then are you stealing the water that would rain on another country?
Wow.
So one can say that there's the possibility of what we might call, quote, theft, unquote. But cloud seeding can be used for a lot of different things. It can be used as a weapon. We used it as a weapon in Vietnam. I won't say it was greatly successful, but it was mildly successful in the Vietnam War to try to diminish the use of the Ho Chi Minh Trail. So there's military uses, but as I say, most countries are using it primarily to have crop preservation.
Wonder if we can put one of the images back on the screen just to see how one of the planes with the wings, and maybe you can just explain a little bit to our viewers a visual example there, so we can just see and just talk our viewers through what we're seeing and exactly how does this technology work.
Well, I'm not sure exactly what this one is, but I suspect it's silver iodine. And what happens is that you have basically it's nothing more than a flare, kind of like you might see at an accident on the highway. But what you're doing is you're burning these materials, which produces microparticles. These get into the cloud and form the nuclei for raindrops. And so the moisture then starts to form around these very small particles. It's bigger and bigger, and if it hits enough weight, it will fall. The wind can keep it up, and of course you can create raindrops, like, say, over the UAE. Now, might be creating raindrops a few thousand feet up, but the heat might evaporate before it hit the ground.
Right. Amazing.
And that's why I say it's not in any way a good science at this time. I mean, we know how to do some of these things. It's simple materials. Again, even table salt can be used. So some people will be a little concerned about silver iodide. And, of course, over a long period of time, I suppose it could be a problem. But again, table salt, sea salt, there's different ways of doing it. All you're trying to do is put something into the cloud that the moisture will condense on.
What do we see the increase of the extreme weathers around the world as well. We see the tornadoes, the thunderstorms, the hurricanes and such things. Is there any technology out there to slow this down?
Well, we actually have used cloud seeding experiments with hurricanes, but the thing is, hurricanes are so massive that even trying to seed them proved to be very ineffective. Because all you did was, maybe you made a little more rain in one spot of the hurricane, but it didn't make any difference in total. You have to realize the forces in a hurricane are more than nuclear bombs multiplied several times. So, from that standpoint, it doesn't help much. But it does do things like reduce the severity of a hailstorm.
What does the Bible and the scriptures say about the change in the weather, the extreme weather that we're experiencing? What do the scriptures say about that?
Absolutely, totally normal. These are just the natural things which God has put into the environment. And, of course, things get better and worse. It fluctuates all the time. People are being terrified for no reason whatsoever by the global warming people. The fact of the matter is the Earth is actually a bit more of a cooling period right now than warming, but we are warmer than we were 125 years ago. But that's when we came out of the little ice age. I mean, if you would just take a look at the history of the UK, for instance, we went into the little ice age about 1250 after the medieval warm period, which was much warmer than today. And it bottomed out, particularly in the 14, 15, 1600s. But about 1895, we finally came out of it. I mean, think about the early history of the 1800s in the UK. You had frost fairs, the Thames froze over and so forth. When was the last time the Thames froze over?
Yeah, we had that big freeze as well, didn't we? Yeah.
So, weather, and you want weather to fluctuate. You wouldn't want it to be stagnant. It'd be more like a person being dead. Um, change is normal in nature. I'm not talking about evolution. I'm just simply talking about the interaction of natural forces that God put in place. And he put them in place, and he says, for instance, in the book of Amos, that he's in control of the weather, period. We can't not control it. And that he can use weather to chastise or bless people. He can use it for various methods and reasons of his own. He can affect world history just as he can with volcanic eruptions or any other significant natural phenomena.
Okay.
But I would point everybody to Genesis 8:22.
Okay.
After the flood, God says, "Now there will be spring and fall, summer and winter, and they shall not cease."